Hey everyone, welcome to the Darshan Talks live stream to the interview. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help you trust the products you depend on, the people you depend on. As you may know, I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA regulated products. So if you think about drugs, wonder about devices, or obsess over pharmacy, this is the interview, this is the podcast for you. I do have to emphasize that I am an attorney. My guests are both attorneys, but we're not your attorney. I do also have to emphasize I'm a pharmacist, but I'm not your pharmacist. So this is not clinical advice or legal advice. I do these interviews because they're a lot of fun. I find myself talking to someone fun, someone interesting, someone new every time. And I find myself learning something new every single time. But it's always good to know that people are listening. So if you like what you hear, please like, leave a comment, please subscribe. If you're on YouTube, please press the like button, press the sort of thumbs up, if you will, press the key. If you want to ask our guest questions, please feel free to do so. After the talk, during the talk, please feel free to share the video. I do also want to emphasize that these are considerations. These are conversations. They do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the host, the guest, or their employers, or their clients. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Darshan Talks, or just go to our website at darshantalks.com. Today's interview is really, really interesting because today is real estate day. And today I signed some paperwork to actually buy my own house. So today today lands up being a really fun real estate day, and I get to talk to my guests today because they are going to talk about real estate. They're going to talk about how real estate is dead, nothing's happening, people have abandoned all hope. I remember these conversations during COVID, where they said we've now all moved out, there's no coming back. So we're just going to have our guests tell us how that is all true and nothing has changed since then. Because, we've all noticed that real estate prices are not doing anything right now. So if you are in the life sciences, if you are expanding, if you are going, do I need more space? What are the considerations I need to have? Today's discussion will be really right up your alley. My guests today are both attorneys, but not practicing attorneys, from Tactix Real Estate Advisors. Our guests today, Gary Lozoff and Dan Ritterman. Gary and Dan, how are you guys?
We're doing well. Thanks so much for having us on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you again for coming on. So first of all, I want to thank you both for using one camera, because that is it's all about efficiency. So I've noticed that we already know that you keep the budgets tight. You make sure that people will come on and they will get the best value. So
well, we really want people to know that Gary and I are both in the office together, and we think that's something to be celebrated these days. So we wanted to make sure we were on one camera.
Yeah, and it's a myth, right? That no one's back at the office, right?
But that's the thing, right? So let's answer the obvious question. Has remote work killed the office?
Remote work has not killed the office, but I do think it has changed the office. And I think that it's a little bit too early. I know we're 18 months into the pandemic now, but I still think it's a little bit too early to really see what the long-term trends with the office space will be. And I think it really depends on where you are. Buildings in Center City are still sparsely populated, under 15% in many cases. But out in the suburbs, you'll see a lot of companies have come back. And it really just depends on where you are and sort of the size of the company that occupies the building. But it will change the landscape going forward, and it sort of remains to be seen exactly how.
Yeah, and I think longer term, many companies are trying to figure out how they're going to use their real estate presence differently in order to not only induce their workers to come back, because these leadership teams know that folks being together in the office, it's one of these 1 + 1 = 360 situation. They want folks in the office. So they're trying to figure out how to induce them to come back in a safe, effective way and keep them there. Keep them there productively, happily, and for a long period of time.
So I have several questions just from that one sentence. So what I want to ask a little bit about, let's start with the initial point that Gary made. And Gary said that in Center City, buildings are only about 15% populated, which seems incredibly low. And then you said that suburbs are back. And I'm thinking about myself, and I'm thinking about how I'm changing the way I operate. And I'm going, do I really want to pay city wage tax? Do I really want to be in the city? What advantage am I getting from the city that I wouldn't get from the suburbs? I'll get more space in the suburbs. Are you seeing those conversations happening, or are they more, I'm just going to where the people are? Like, what is the thought process around moving to the suburbs, if you will?
I think some of it has to do with public transportation, at least at the outset, where public transportation has really suffered as a result of the pandemic. People are not riding trains, they're not riding buses. And a lot of people who were relying on commuting to and from Center City by public transportation are realizing they may have to rely on other means of transportation. So what you'll find, this is anecdotal, is that in the city, the parking lots are full. It's just the buildings are not, because the people who are coming in are by and large driving in. And I think that in the suburbs, you have some public transportation access to certain areas, but generally speaking, they are hubs that are much more serviced by people commuting by cars and finding other ways to get to work. It also has to do with the size of the company. And what you find, again, these are generalizations, but
Of course,
the larger the company, the less likely they are to be occupying their office space currently. So larger companies have sort of company-wide mandates saying we're going to stay home until a certain date, whereas the smaller the company it is, the easier it is to either have more flexible rules or just to sort of play things by ear as you need to use your office space.
And Dan, isn't it the case though that we'll stay within our own region, right? There's still, and perhaps even more so now, 2 years into this COVID realm, there's a laser focus on how to attract and retain particularly younger workers in the cohort, many of whom want to live in and around Greater Center City.
that's very interesting. So you still see that younger people are saying, I want to be in the city. I want the liveliness of the city. I live in Center City. So just by the way, we're in Philadelphia for those people who are listening, because I have listeners from all over the world. We're in Center City, Philadelphia, which is the heart of Philadelphia. And that's where I can tell you that at night, the restaurants are all full.
Mm-hmm.
But during the day, as you're pointing out, it's a little bit more interestingly occupied. The areas that 2 years ago that you'd see super busy, like West Market Street, like the other side of City Hall, that you'd expect to be super busy are not. But on the other hand, the places where you'd go get food, Reading Terminal Market, all those areas are still full. So what I'm hearing you say is that's what's being reflected. People are changing patterns. So the patterns that we're seeing, and I'm trying to sort of understand what you're saying. The patterns, what I think you're saying are people are coming in, commuting, and then going back. It's almost tactical the way they're using the city, as opposed to this is where we're going to be. Is that fair, or am I misunderstanding what you're putting out?
No, I think
Totally.
that's right. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I also think that to sort of pivot a little bit to life sciences and what we're sort of talking about here is, I think that a lot of developers, a lot of ownership of buildings when the pandemic hit, they thought to themselves, like everyone else did, who are the users who are going to be physically occupying these buildings going forward? And the answer is significantly different today than it was 18 to 24 months ago. And the answer really is a lot of these life sciences companies, they're the kind of companies who probably can't go home, or at least many of their functions can't go home and become more remote. So we've seen that transition to some buildings trying to attract a different type of tenant because they think that's where sort of the long-term growth and development is going to be.
Particularly affecting businesses that are in early stages of drug or medical device development and have a need for lab space that they don't want to offload to CROs. They have to be here. To Dan's point.
So let me ask you this question. We're gonna and I'm jumping a little bit, but I enjoy this conversation. I don't get to talk to people who are in real estate who can use the word CRO and actually know what that means. So this is a super fun conversation for me. But when you're talking about hubs, so let's start from the beginning, right? We spoke a little bit about the environment, but let's talk about the Philadelphia hub. What makes people come to Philadelphia? Why won't people just go, I want the richness of the environment that's in Silicon Valley or in Boston, or I want the lower prices that might be in Research Triangle Park. What makes Philadelphia unique? What is it that we have that people are coming for?
Well, I'll lead on this one. I think what's happening here, Darshan, is a narrative where chapters are being written organically on a daily basis. And they're being written in the labs and other research spaces of large, globally renowned academic research institutions and other related related type of facilities and environments. I'm thinking in particular of our universities in University City and in North Philadelphia at Temple. I'm thinking of the University City Science Center. I'm thinking of CHOP. It's out of these research institutions, let's call them, that these businesses are born. And they're born out of hard science research in labs. And those labs end up creating in often breathtakingly important scientific discoveries. And those discoveries in turn are thought to have potential for commercial impact.
Please go ahead.
To build off of, aside from the research institutions, you also have a large population that is technically, has the ability to do this type of work. So you kind of need a confluence of the research, the workforce, and then you also need the real estate, because you need a location to really make all of this happen. And one of the things that Philadelphia has is Philadelphia is a large city with surprisingly affordable real estate by and large. And even the new development that is going up, where you're seeing record high prices for numbers that we've never seen in Philadelphia, compared to some of these other hubs that you think about, like Silicon Valley or Boston or New York, this is still a relatively cheap real estate market in order to put your foot down. So you get this confluence of all of these factors that really make Philadelphia kind of the ideal place for these companies.
Right. So many of these companies are growing here. They're born here. They're growing here. They're migrating out of these institutional settings into private office buildings and dedicated spaces and shared spaces, shared lab facilities and dedicated lab facilities. The other component that you raised a moment ago was you sort of inferred that there was a question around relocation. That's the other component. There's a story around that's developing that's really interesting as well. Amicus is a particularly keen example of that. The University City, a company that was headquartered in central to northern Jersey for lots of really interesting reasons. They decided to look more intensively at this geography because of so many of the cultural and civic and economic attributes that Dan referred to. And their business now, they created a headquarters space here. The business has since broken up into two separate units, but there's a big part of their business that's staying here and growing here that wasn't here 5 years ago.
So you're talking about a variety of different organizations, which I find really interesting. So there's this part where you talk about these seed companies, for lack of a better term, who are being the ideas coming from a CHOP or a UPenn or HUP, if you will, or any of the others. And then you're talking about a company that's more established, like an Amicus, that's coming in as well. Do you think that as you're guiding a company in your role in choosing the right location for them, how do you start asking the questions to help them decide where is right for them? And do you generally tend to recommend Philadelphia, or do you kind of go, we want to find something that's right for you, and we have resources all over the country? How does that work for you guys at Tactix?
Well, Darshan, it begins in the case of how we do our work with listening to the C teams, listening to the executive committees, listening to key investors and other constituents in this corporate process to help them, right, to make a determination on geography based on a lot of different factors, some of which is, as Dan alluded to, where their workforce is situated, There are other elements, including, taxes that you referred to a little earlier in this conversation that play into it, and other economic incentives. We listen, and then we develop a set of geographic parameters around a search based on those conversations.
So when you are helping these companies go, okay, we're going to talk to you, we're going to understand what you're looking for. What you're saying is there's no one formula fits all. There's no one size fits all.
There can't be.
There can't be.
Yeah.
But do your resources go nationwide, or at Tactix, are you more of a Philadelphia organization and that's what you do?
We do work nationwide. A bulk of our work is located in Philadelphia, and frankly, that's where a lot of the work that there is to be done right now is in Philadelphia. We're fortunate to be in a market right now that has really come to the forefront of the national picture in the life sciences world. If you look at any kind of industry publications, Philadelphia is always high up on the list, and it's because of those factors that I talked about before, where it's relatively unique to have sort of all of these things come together in a city the size of Philadelphia. So I think Philadelphia does present a unique opportunity, but our work takes us across the country.
So let's talk a little bit about Tactix, right? So we've talked a little bit about what the problem is, which is people are trying to figure out where they want to be and what they want to do. And they reach out to Tactix. What are they asking Tactix at this moment? And how do you help?
So real estate is sort of a unique, it's a unique situation that companies don't have to deal with constantly. So it's a problem that comes up every couple of years, once a year. And generally speaking, there is not somebody on the C team who has extensive experience in running real estate transactions. So that's why they bring in a company like Tactix to say, here's our situation. These are the goals we're trying to accomplish 1, 2, 5, 10 years down the line. How can we put a strategy into place to make sure that we are in the right position sort of going forward? One of the things that people don't realize about this process, it can very easily be an 18 to 24 month process from the time that we say we have a real estate requirement until the time that you're actually working within that space. So people come to Tactix to get sort of a holistic strategy for how we can go about this process from beginning to end, to make sure that they understand the steps of the process. We're doing our part to educate them about how this works, because again, this is not in their wheelhouse, generally speaking. So we want to make sure that they understand everything that goes into the process so that we can all sort of get on the same page and then put together a cohesive strategy. People come to Tactix specifically because we sort of fulfill what I think is a pretty unique position in the real estate market. So by and large, most real estate brokerage firms that are out there, most real estate advisors, they spend the majority of their time working for developers and owners of real estate and trying to find groups to go into that space.
Yeah.
Tactix takes the opposite angle. Gary and I are both former attorneys. We're happily not practicing currently, but you can't really put that side of your life away where you say, look, this is my client and I want to get this group the best possible outcome. Not try to find a middle ground where everything comes together for both these groups. We want to make sure we're being a zealous advocate for our client. So at Tactix, the only thing that we do is represent end users of real estate. So companies who are looking to occupy real estate, whether that's by building, buying, or leasing, we only want to represent companies that will actually be using the real estate. And that way our clients come to us and they know that they are getting an unbiased advice. And I think one of the hardest things to get in the real estate world is to truly know that your broker is only working for you, because you can get pulled in so many directions. And really, we are outcome neutral in that it doesn't matter to us who the listing broker is or the developer is or the owner of a building. We just want to make sure that we find the best solution for our clients. And that, especially in this world, that really speaks loudly, because people want to make sure that they have someone on their side they can sort of trust and lean on to be giving them unbiased advice.
Particularly today, Darshan, if we're sort of thinking about this subset of the commercial real estate process affecting life sciences businesses, we're talking about a moment in time in our process where the cost and timeline to do these deals is under such stress. Construction costs, both labor and materials, are at all-time highs. Timelines to construct and once a deal is agreed to and the scope is agreed to, and there's a process around which the construction contracting is bid, just to take a company from that moment in the process to actual occupancy, as Dan referred to a moment ago, we've never experienced stress like we have in this part of our economy in my entire decades-long practice as we are now. So against that backdrop, it makes it all the more important that what we're doing is perfectly aligned with what our clients' operational and growth goals are. And we take a long bit of time to develop that with them, and then we help them to manage through a process where we compete out different options, right, in the marketplace. And we work together to help them manage through the selection of a team to help them, right, on the design side, on the engineering side. Project management, it often comes into play. And sometimes that ends up leading us to different construction contracting firms as well. We help them to work through all those aspects to come to a project outcome that's brilliant for them.
I find this super interesting because when I start thinking about what you're saying, what you're saying is that it takes you 18 to 24 months to get someone in a place that they would want to be so that they can actually move, which makes sense when you're talking to a large company. I'm also thinking that seems like a really long time to plan anything because who knows where you're going to be in 18, 24 months. And today is a really good day to be asking that question. Someone who reached out to you right before the pandemic has a very different set of needs today than they did the day they reached out to you.
Absolutely.
So how do you adjust? So first of all, I would say that if you're in the C-suite of a life sciences company and you're caught up in a situation where you're going, what are my needs? What does the market look like? Having someone like you guys by their side going, here's what the market is, and here's how you need to adapt, and whoever's on the other side needs to adapt so that you have a answer that makes sense for both of you. And having someone like Tactix be on that conversation, guiding that process makes a lot of sense. My question for you is, one of the things you said, and I think Gary said this, before you start off by saying, what we'd like to have is a clear scope of what we're looking for. How does it change when the scope itself keeps changing and not by no fault of the client?
I'm laughing, Darshan, because we were talking before about a large requirement that I've been involved in for the last 18 months for a biotech business that's headquartered here. That requirement has evolved organically. I was engaged by that client in April of 2020 to find them a space to host or to house an additional biomanufacturing line for their business. Right. And that grew substantially, changed in complexity and scope over time, such that we're looking at something radically dissimilar from that. And it developed organically through our analysis with them of what their needs really were. If you could make the wish, what would you have? And it wasn't just that 10,000 foot second lyophilization line. It was something much more robust, much more complicated. And we ultimately were able to get that done through some ingenuity and and leveraging some great market conditions.
I think what we try to do for companies who are facing uncertain growth in the short term is we really do what we can to ensure that there are some expansion rights and that they have the ability to, from the outset, looking at spaces that have additional space available to them that they can eventually grow into. Yep. And this is the kind of story that every landlord loves to hear, right? Every building would love to hear that you're going to come in here, we want to grow within your space, and we want to make sure that this can be our home going forward. And that becomes part of the story that you take to the market about this company, which is, this is what our growth trajectory is over the next few years, and we try to tailor our solution to that. We want to make sure that our clients are never in a situation where by the time they've built something, it's already obsolete. Right? We want to make sure that we are future-proofing these spaces for them as best as you can. And again, that's going to require a lot of unique factors depending on the building that you're looking at and what the requirement is. But to ensure that there is some flexibility going forward, in the event that additional space is needed.
And let's be real. We're all friends. Some of this can't be de-risked entirely, right? And to Dan's point, I mean, businesses that we're dealing with often are very dynamic, and the growth trajectory is uncertain. We can do our best to program in the kind of flexibility that the C team believes it needs at a certain moment in time, and it may change over time, and they'll come back to us, and that'll be a great thing for us to work on together, whether it's 18 or 24 or 36 months downfield.
Which is really interesting to me, because when you start thinking about these evolving companies, everyone's talking about the big successes that everyone's having, right? Everyone's talking about the economy's grown at this stupendous rate. Everyone's investing. There's literally no way, there's no place you can put money right now that's not growing. I mean, you start literally looking at NFTs, and it's become like imaginary stuff is gaining significant value.
That's right.
My question for you is, what no one's talking about is, at the end of every party, there's a crash. What does that crash look like, and how does Tactix help de-risk that scenario? Is no one talking about that scenario right now? Is everyone going, let's focus on what the immediate need is, which is capturing our growth, and we'll worry about the de-risking of the.
I love that question. I love that question. And as Darshan, as lawyers, because all three of us are lawyers, we wring our hands about the what ifs, right? Yeah. And so one of the most important parts of our process, our contracting process, meaning creating competition among different landlords and coming to deals that look great for us, for our clients, quantitatively and qualitatively. One of the key elements of that, those qualitative terms, deals with contraction rights, early termination rights, right? Mm-hmm. Not just expansion and extension, but thinking about the what if scenario, that things don't go as leadership believes they will go.
We're thinking about who liability extends to in situations like that. So really having a holistic approach about thinking about, sure, what happens on the positive side if we have to expand and get larger, but we also want to be realistic and make sure that we are taking all accounts into consideration. And I think that's why our background sort of, I think, provides our clients with a little bit of an extra way of thinking about these things to make sure that they know that we are thinking about both the positives and the negatives of what could come going forward.
Dan, you raised a really good point too. On this sort of qualitative side of life, oftentimes, Darshan, in connection with representation of companies that are just emerging into commercialization, particularly against this backdrop of extraordinarily expensive build-outs, there's always a conversation about collateral, lease collateral to secure the tenant's obligations. It's a very, very important part of our negotiation. It's something that we deal with earlier rather than later in this process to minimize, if not eliminate, guarantees or other collateral offered up by principals or lead investors.
That sounds like a whole other topic, and we're already well past time. But this is always such a fun topic and such a fun conversation. So what this means is, unfortunately, it means you guys will have to come back and we'll have to have another conversation that talks more about this situation, because this is fascinating, and I'm hoping that people have been listening and
we'll come back when you buy your next house. Okay.
That's fair. Let me ask you a couple of questions that I always ask my guests, if that's okay. The first question: what's something you'd like to ask the audience?
We'd like to ask all of our clients, what's keeping you up at night about your real estate concerns? I know that this is specific to what we're talking about today,
sure,
but it's the truth, especially these days where, like Gary said, retaining employees rather is so difficult. And having the right home to do your important work for these companies is so important. That what is it about the real estate that keeps you up at night? Because I think that's a great question that really helps our clients hone in on what's really important to them.
Correct.
So I usually try to answer the first question first, just so
Oh,
you at least have an answer. I think when I talk to my clients and they talk about sort of the real estate question that keeps them up, I think the big question is, how much do my clients need? What it in a world where employees, you're getting the split of employees who are saying we want to be completely remote, to companies saying we need you to be here because there's no way to do this remotely. There's no way to replicate the fact that you need to have these conversations in person and actually have touch contact.
Or do your
You can't
science together.
exactly to do your own to
Right.
do science. In those cases, how do you meet the needs of both? Do you create a flex space? Is everything a flex space? Because everyone had talked a few years ago about that whole open office concept, and people. What I've heard is people weren't happy with it. Turns out it wasn't as productive as people thought it would be. So the question is this hybrid model workable, or are we going to find out in 5 years that no? Turns out people are extremely unproductive after a certain amount of time if they're given too much flexibility, or we find out no, people do exactly what they were supposed to do when you give them back 3 hours of their life in commuting. So I think that's one of those questions that, from a real estate perspective, the conversations I've had keep people up at night. I also have a little bit of real estate, and yeah, I have the flip side of that conversation, which is how do I get people into the door? But that's a different discussion.
And you know what, Darshan? That question is also keeping up landlords, their investors, and their mortgage lenders.
Yeah, exactly.
It affects all different points in the spectrum of our real estate process. Great point.
Here's another question. What's something you guys learned in the last month?
I learned something just this morning, right? I was
Okay.
out to breakfast with a friend of mine, a trusted referral source. He runs a home acute and hospice care program for a major regional medical operator. They have a workforce in Pennsylvania and New Jersey that's about 500 persons, right? Because they're going out to residences to help folks. He said to me today that they are down 100 full-time employee equivalent positions. That's how acute the labor market is.
Yeah.
From the CEO of this business unit, which is a terror dome, right? Because everything about this business depends upon having the employees trained, willing to, and actually going out to meet these clients and patients in their homes to do these medical services.
Yeah.
And they can't do it because they don't have the folks in staffed to do it right now. Which
is crazy. And the funny thing is, as I mentioned, I'm a pharmacist, and I talk to my friends who are pharmacists. The people are completely overworked already. So there was a situation of a pharmacist who died waiting for a replacement. The replacement pharmacist didn't make it, and she had a heart attack and she passed away. And then there are nurses I know and pharmacists I know who are quitting their jobs saying, I don't have a backup plan, but I can't do this anymore. So it's sort of both sides of that same equation, which is people are leaving saying we're working too much. That's causing people to say we don't have enough people, causing more people to quit because they're working too much.
Right, because the working conditions are unbearable. It's sort of a self-fulfilling terror dome. I don't know how else to describe it, but it startled me because the proportions were so staggering, Darshan, right?
Yeah.
The need versus the denominator, which was the existing workforce. Really interesting.
So
it's your turn. It's Dan's turn.
I'm a little more basic because that got pretty intense. Yeah. I started playing drums recently, and I learned how to do a drum roll.
You really?
That's my answer.
I have to ask, as an adult, what is it like to learn the drums? Because as a child, when you see a child learning the drums, your only thought process as an adult is, can you please stop? Because that sounds really painful. But as an
The
adult,
answer is electric drums. That's the answer.
I have no idea why is that the answer though.
Oh, because they're not loud. You play them in headphones, and they're very,
Oh,
very
is that
good.
right? I didn't know that. Okay, I learned something new.
It's something I'd always wanted to do, and I finally said, if I don't do it now, I'm never doing it. So I did it. Now I'm taking lessons.
For you.
Well, here's another thing that Dan did recently, and he's reportedly pretty good at it. He started playing paddle tennis.
Oh, that's true.
So
that's
a bunch of our crew went out on Friday to play paddle tennis. I couldn't join them because I was busy on a client matter, Darshan, of course.
Of course.
And I heard back from this crew that Dan, first time out, is already a better player than me. That's a grievance. I've got my
that's
work
what Gary
to do.
learned. All right.
I'm pretty sure that's the real estate equivalent of a pool shark. But in,
That's right. That's right.
But yeah. So we now know Dan's secret, which is do not play paddleboard with him for money.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
Paddle tennis is his thing.
So here's the next question for you. What's something that made you happy in the last week?
This was at the risk of being cheesy, and I know it's likely that it will be perceived this way. A solution revealed itself for a small company that I represent in the gene editing business for its new dedicated workspace that wasn't out there. It was improbable. And we were at our wits' end to try to secure them their next home. And it looks like we're going to be able to get it done, at least on a short-term basis for them. And in light of current market conditions here, Darshan, for end users like this company, that was something to say, God bless. It was a good solution.
Gary, I'm sorry, I'm going to call you out. That is pretty cheesy. Yeah.
What? And it's true.
All right, I'll go even cheesier. And I like to answer this on a personal level. My son is 5, and he scored his first soccer goal of the season.
There you go.
So that is that made me happy this week.
That's awesome. Congratulations to both of you, actually. Mazel tov. What is something most people don't know about you? I know we already know that Dan plays paddle tennis better than most people, and he is a what's the other thing you just mentioned? You play the drums.
Oh yeah.
So are those your two, or do you have something else that most people don't know about you?
No, I think that works for me. I think we'll go with the drums. I like that's a little offbeat. I like that. What about you?
Okay.
Well, something that a lot of folks don't know about me, to riff off of Dan's music stuff, is that I spent 10 years of my career in the retail side of the music industry.
Did you really?
Yep.
Huh. That is a really cool.
That's right.
No, that's super cool. And the last question, and I've been putting this throughout the whole conversation, but how can people actually reach you?
So the best way is through our website. You can go to it's tactix.com, TACTIX.com. You can reach me at dritterman@tactix.com, and you can reach Gary at Lozoff@tactix.com. Our phone numbers are on the website. You can always give us a call anytime. We want people to know that
operators are standing by.
That's right. But we truly do want people to know that we are a free resource to help people, and are always happy to have these conversations, whether it's us or whether it's somebody else. We want the real estate environment, and specifically the life sciences real estate environment in Philadelphia, to continue to grow and prosper, and that benefits everybody. And the best way that we can do that is by being a resource for people and helping provide them information to keep helping it grow.
And you know what? As part of that, Dan, we want to defog the process. There's a bit of mystery to it. There's a bit of angst for all of these businesses when they think about what's next for their workspace need. And we want to lower the temperature on that and bring some of this into the light.
Very, very cool. I'm gonna ask this question, which is, do you? I know you've mentioned that you work exclusively, to quote you guys, exclusively in helping clients get the space they need. Do you ever help the companies the leasing companies, if you will, figure out how they should reframe their real estate so that it's more appealing? Have you ever been asked that before? Is that a thing that happens?
I think some of that happens in an organic way, Darshan, through our process, we think about space options that perhaps the ownership hadn't. So when we develop these searches and there's interest from our client to take a look at some of these opportunities, those opportunities then translate into tours and conversations with ownership groups. And there are moments in time where we actually we feel the aha. We didn't get it, and we're really glad you did. And we can talk about that on our next conversation.
That's perfect. Again, this was amazing, Gary, Dan. It was so great having both of you on. I appreciate you guys coming on. This was wonderful, and I can't wait to have you on again.
Darshan, thanks so much. Great being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Stay well and stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely.